The church bells at St. Helena Chapel didn't just ring. They trembled through the air like they could barely contain all the emotion packed inside that little town. Every pew was filled, everyone dressed in their best, everyone whispering and craning their necks the second the massive wooden doors began to open.
Ever wondered where you really come from? Not the stories, but the science. On this channel, we decode real DNA, uncover lost ancestries, and bring ancient genomes to life through cinematic storytelling. If that excites you, subscribe for weekly insights. Like the video to support science-based history, and drop a comment. Your questions help guide what we explore next.
The bride was here, and not just any bride. Leila Hartman, the girl everyone knew as the quiet, gentle soul who somehow managed to carry half the world's pain on her back without ever saying a word about it. As she stepped inside, sunlight washed over her like a spotlight. Her veil shimmered, her bouquet of lilacs trembled in her hands, and for a moment the room fell so still that you could have sworn no one dared breathe. But that silence didn't last, because the second she took another step, the guests noticed something off. The bottom of her gown didn't fall the way a gown should. It didn't glide. It didn't float. It shifted, like something underneath it moved, or existed where nothing should be. People nudged each other, eyebrows raised. A couple of her cousins exchanged quick looks. An elderly woman near the aisle clutched her pearls dramatically, because there's always one. But Leila kept walking, steady but slow, her fingers digging just slightly into her father's arm. Anyone paying close attention would have noticed her taking careful steps. Not the kind of careful meant to look elegant, the kind meant to keep something hidden. Her dress had been tailored beautifully, too beautifully, a little too structured, cinched too deliberately in some places, puffed oddly in others. Anyone who knew bridal fashion would have said something was off the moment she appeared. But no one spoke up. No one dared interrupt such a sacred moment. Her groom Mason stood at the altar, hands clasped together, eyes locked on her as if she were the only person in the room. He was smiling, but there was something behind that smile. A mix of disbelief, admiration, and something that almost looked like fear. Maybe fear of losing her. Maybe fear of what today meant for both of them. When Leila reached him, she let out a shaky breath, one Mason noticed but didn't question. Instead, he squeezed her fingers gently, grounding her. The priest began speaking, but Leila barely heard a word. Her heart was pounding far too loudly, her palms were sweating, and she could feel the weight, the secret, strapped beneath her dress. She tried not to think about it. She tried to push the memories away. But standing still, facing the man she loved, with her secret literally pressed against her body, everything she'd run from came rushing back so sharply it felt like the air had been stolen from her lungs. It hadn't started with joy. It had started with a night she once wished she could erase. And the story behind what she hid under her dress? That story began long before this wedding day. 2 years before the wedding, before the white gown and shaking hands and hidden secrets, Leila was a completely different person. She'd grown up in a rough corner of Louisiana with a father who drifted in and out of her life like a ghost, and a mother who tried her best but was swallowed by exhaustion more often than not. Leila learned early to carry her own weight, be her own comfort, and hide her fears because no one was coming to fix them. When she left for college on a small scholarship, she felt like she'd finally stepped into the life she'd always dreamed of. She studied art, worked part-time at a flower shop, and for the first time she felt light, like a person instead of a burden. And then she met Evan. He was charming in that flashy, reckless way that makes your stomach flutter before your brain can warn you it's probably a bad idea. He knew how to smile at exactly the right moment. He knew the right words to say, and he made Leela feel chosen.
Chosen was a dangerous feeling. Their year together started beautifully and ended like a nightmare. When Leela found out she was pregnant, she trembled with a strange mixture of fear and hope. She imagined Evan lifting her up, promising they'd figure it out together. She imagined love deepening in the face of challenge. Instead, Evan's reaction was a cold shock of reality. No, you're not keeping it, he'd snapped, pacing their tiny apartment like a trapped animal. You're not dragging me down with a baby. Fix this, Leela. Fix it. Fix it. Like she had broken something on purpose. Like the tiny life inside her wasn't life at all. She ran that night, shoes untiled, coat forgotten, rain pouring so hard it stung her eyes. She didn't stop running until her legs gave out under an old street lamp downtown and she collapsed on the curb, sobbing into her shaking hands. She thought she was alone, but she wasn't. A voice cut through the storm, warm, steady, concerned. "Hey, are you hurt? Do you need help?" She looked up and saw a stranger kneeling in front of her, rain dripping from his hair, eyes full of worry. That stranger would later become her groom. But that night, all she knew was that he stayed. He didn't ask accusing questions. He didn't judge the mascara streaking down her cheeks. He didn't flinch when she told him the truth. All of it. His name was Mason Clark, and he was a paramedic on his way home from a long shift. He sat beside her on the wet concrete, letting her cry until the storm quieted in her chest. From that night forward, Mason became a constant in her life. A friend first, a safe place second, and eventually, slowly, something deeper. But life didn't care about their comfort or timing. 3 months into her pregnancy, Leela had a miscarriage. The world she had just begun to rebuild collapsed in a single moment. Mason held her through the pain. He brought her meals. He sat with her in silence. He treated her grief like something sacred instead of something embarrassing. And little by little, Leela found herself wishing for a future she hadn't thought she deserved, one where someone actually stayed. When Mason finally confessed he was in love with her, she froze, overwhelmed. But the truth was simple. She loved him too. They built a life that felt healing instead of chaotic, strong instead of fragile. But just when things seemed steady, just when Leela began to imagine forever, tragedy came for them too. One night after dinner, Mason collapsed. Tests, waiting rooms, doctors speaking in quiet, heavy voices. Brain cancer, not operable. Not responding to treatment, not curable. They tried everything. Hope fought hard. Reality fought harder. Eventually, the doctor sat down with them and said the words no one should ever have to hear. You should spend the time you have left making memories that matter. Leela broke down, begging for any miracle, any sliver of hope. But Mason simply took her hands and whispered, "It's okay. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only afraid of leaving you alone." And then one night, voice trembling, eyes full of tears, he asked her the question she didn't expect. "Marry me, Leela. Let me be your husband, even if our time is short." She said yes through sobs. And that yes would shape everything that came next, including the secret she carried beneath her dress on their wedding day. Their wedding was small but beautiful, the kind of ceremony where grief and love mix in a way that makes every moment feel heavier than the last. Mason was so weak by then that he had to sit through most of it, but he insisted on being there, insisted on seeing her walk down that aisle. Leela's dress was simple from a distance, but unusual up close. The skirt was fuller than necessary, the fabric layered oddly, and whenever she moved, something seemed to shift beneath the satin. Still, no one questioned it. They exchanged vows through tears, promises wrapped in the quiet understanding that their time together would be painfully short.
When the ceremony ended, guests gathered at the reception hall. Leela moved carefully between tables, her dress brushing softly against her ankles. And then, during a moment of adjustment, her maid of honor, her best friend Claire, accidentally brushed against something under the gown. A box, strapped to Leela's thigh. Claire blinked in confusion. "What is that? Leela, what are you hiding?" Leela froze. She had planned this moment, but now that it was here, fear washed over her in a wave so strong she struggled to breathe. "Open it," she whispered. Claire slipped the tiny carved wooden box from the strap and eased it open. Inside was a folded note tied with a lavender ribbon. She looked at Leela for confirmation. Leela nodded. Claire unfolded the note and began reading aloud. The room fell silent instantly. "Hello, everyone. I wanted to wait until this moment to share something important with the people we love most." People leaned in. Mason turned toward Leela, eyes wide. Claire's voice trembled. "I'm pregnant." Gasps, hands flying to mouths, a chair scraping loudly across the floor, someone dropping their fork. Mason went pale, whiter than anyone had ever seen him. Leela's secret wasn't a medical device, not some sentimental trinket, not something tragic. It was a new life, their baby. The guests erupted first in shock, then in tears, then in applause. It spiraled from stunned silence to full-blown emotion in seconds. Mason shook his head slowly, tears rolling freely. "Leela, is it true?" She nodded, crying. "I found out 3 weeks after your diagnosis started to decline. I didn't want to tell you until today because I wanted you to feel joy, real joy, even for just one moment." Mason broke down. This is the greatest gift you could have given me." He managed to stand despite the weakness in his legs and wrapped her in his arms, holding her like she was the last beautiful thing in the world, which she was. The celebration that followed was filled with laughter, tears, hugs that lasted a little too long, and smiles that tried to hide heartbreak. But the truth hung over everyone like a shadow. Mason would never get to raise his child. 4 months later, Leela gave birth to a son, a little boy with Mason's nose and soft brown eyes. She named him Mason Jr., just as she'd promised. And 2 days after holding his son for the first and last time, Mason passed away. At his funeral, Leela stood by his casket, cradling her newborn, whispering, "I'll live enough life for both of us, I promise." 2 years passed. Leela's son grew from a tiny newborn into a bright, curious toddler who toddled around with an expression that mirrored Mason's so perfectly it sometimes punched the air right out of her lungs. She poured her grief into writing, short stories at first, then a full novel inspired by her journey. When her son turned 3, she published it. The book exploded in popularity. People connected with her honesty, her pain, her resilience, her love. She went on to publish 2 more books. She bought a small home with a garden Mason would have loved. She hung pictures of him everywhere, so their son would grow up knowing the face of the man who had fought so hard to stay alive long enough to feel him in his arms. And every year on their anniversary, she brought their son to Mason's grave. She'd kneel in the grass, guiding her son's small hand to place flowers on the stone. "Your daddy was brave," she'd whisper. "He loved you before he even met you." And somehow, even without memories, the child seemed to understand. Sometimes he'd press his little palm to the stone and say, "Hi, Daddy," like he knew the man buried beneath it. Children feel things adults can't explain. And Leela would smile through tears, thinking Mason must see them somehow, must feel them, must know his legacy lived on. Her wedding day had been bittersweet. beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. And the secret she hid under her dress, a secret that stunned every guest, had become the anchor that kept her moving forward. Life hadn't been fair, but somehow it still gave her a miracle. And in the soft, quiet moments of her new life, she often wondered, does a parent's love live on in a child, even if the child never gets the chance to know them? It certainly felt like it. And maybe that was enough.